What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Processing Blue, where we process blue for you. I'm Alex Zietlow. He's Mike Kaye, and we cover the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. And for our YouTube watchers, to the man who is shrouded in some sort of godly glow, Mike Kaye, how are you doing?
Did I make it through minicamp today with all that humidity? Because I do kind of feel like I've got like a ghostly presence going on if you're watching this at home. Some of you aren't, some of you are, but you should know there's like an aura above me or terrible lighting, whichever way you want to. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say. I'm doing well, Alex. Happy to be in mandatory minicamp where I feel like we can officially call these workouts practices. The pads aren't on, but the competitiveness is pretty apparent, and so is the energy. But we've got a lot to discuss today. What you got for us?
So we're gonna later in the show we're gonna talk to a former tight end of the Carolina Panthers, Dominique Dafney, and we're gonna get his perspective on what mandatory minicamp is like in the Dave Canales system. But first, Mike, we got to start with the big news of the day, and it's gonna come in the form of a big question. Mike, is it David Moore season? Is right now June 2026 David Moore season?
Well, in baseball, they call it hitting season. In on Mint Street, they call it David Moore season. Yes, it is in
Let's
fact
go.
David Moore season. I thought it was a big deal that Nick Samek was taking number 2 center snaps over Sam Heck today, but let me tell you something. David Moore is out there playing catch with Bryce Young, and that's not to say the defense is playing poorly. It's to say they have a lot of chemistry. And I said this last week. The way he performs within this offense, the relationship he has with Dave Canales. By the way, this wouldn't be like one of those like teacher's pet sort of things. Like he's performing on a daily basis. It's clear Bryce trusts him. It's clear he knows where to be. It's clear he trusts his hands. Like David Moore is a solid NFL player who understands this offense, who knows this offense better than anyone, and it shows in a non-padded practice. But I will tell you, last year, I think it hurt them that he was not healthy for most of the year because when he wasn't healthy and Jalen Coker weren't healthy, they had to force feed T Mac to the degree, and the offense suffered a bit from that. Or when it wasn't suffering, they focused way heavily on the run game, and that's not necessarily sustainable as we saw. So yeah, I think David Moore is a solid player who is having a really good offseason program. What's your biggest takeaway? Because we saw some pretty big plays today, but we've seen pretty big plays from him the other two practice or workouts we were at during OTAs.
Yeah, I don't think that we should discount the fact that David Moore is playing well and just kind of cast it off as oh, he's a veteran. He's been in Dave Canales' system for a really long time. He knows where he should be. He like you know, knows every single route that Bryce Young is going to ask him to run. Like that is an advantage of him right now, and that's honestly an advantage for Xavier Legette as well because he's going into his third year in this same exact system with the same exact quarterback. But you can't discount it because he made a catch over Mike Jackson, I think, today. And yeah, it was like an intermediate route where he was schemed open and Mike Jackson was in the vicinity, but that's still a big deal.
That
Um,
happens. That happens on Sundays every few plays, to be honest with you. And no, to your point, I don't mean to cut you off, but like he's not just getting open and having balls fall into his hand. Like today, the best play of the day was a lofted bullet over. I know that sounds weird, a lofted bullet, but Bryce Young threw what would look like a double off the wall on a line drive to David Moore over traffic. And I thought that was a really impressive play. It showed timing, it showed kind of athleticism. But yeah, to your point, I think I want to back you up there.
yeah, absolutely. He's also so okay. He's 31 years old this year. He's going to be 32 in January, so he's going to play the bulk of his 2026 season as a 31-year-old. The rest of the wide receiver room is really young in Carolina. Kind of to your point of last year, the receiving core kind of struggling at points outside of Teteroa McMillan. You got McMillan, who's 23, Jalen Coker, who's 24, Xavier Legette, who's 25, and you have Jimmy Horn Jr. who is 23, and you can like kind of list out the names. Bryson Tremaine is, I think, 26, stuff like this. Like the team did miss him last year. There's really no question about it, and you can kind of ask the other wide receivers in the room, particularly T-Mac, hey man, like, what does David Moore mean to this team? And he'll be as effusive as he'll be of anyone in that locker room. So I asked that question in this way because for whatever reason, fans, or maybe it's just certain accounts on Twitter or whatever, and I'm paying too much attention to them like I sometimes do, but like for whatever reason, fans get annoyed that David Moore is making plays and that he is like in a semi-important part of this passing offense. And I must admit, Mike, I don't really get it.
I think it's a symptom of fandom. And I kind of said that earlier on Twitter and got some replies. I think it's a symptom of fandom where you want the young guy with upside as opposed to the guy because there's always something, you're always chasing something. And I think to an extent I understand that, but I've seen so many paper tiger talents come through here and come through other teams that I've covered that fans just attach themselves to. And it's like, if anything, David Moore takes a step back on the depth chart to younger talent, them wanting to check out this upside. Like, he wasn't active during the playoff game. Jimmy Horn was. If you wanted to ask me who they probably trust more, it's David Moore in that situation. That said, like I remember saying very early on, your first year here during training camp in 2023, that Shi Smith was not going to make this team. I said it multiple times and got so many emails and like tweets and replies about it. Didn't make the team, hasn't played in the NFL since. Amir Smith-Marset, everybody was obsessed with that guy.
I was obsessed with him. I was obsessed with him.
He returned kicks for the Giants and then basically became a practice squad player again. Who were some of the other wide receivers last year? The undrafted guys got a lot of love last year.
We were obsessed. We as a media was obsessed with Hunter Renfrow, and
right. Like, I've just seen so many guys who have shown that they cannot consistently be reliable. David Moore, if anything, is reliable, and I think that's a discussion that you have without emotion. It is, and it's not. Look, it's easy for me to say. I've got nothing in the game, but for a fan, I completely understand why you'd be like, wow, Jimmy Horn's really quick. He's really twitchy. If they can develop him further, he's going to be this big deal. David Moore is pretty much what he's going to be. Just this reliable guy who can play the X, he can play the Z, he can play the slot. He's going to get you 10 yards, but what's he going to do beyond that? And I understand the logic of that. My pushback on it, though, is every offense needs one of those guys because Jalen Coker's dealt with injuries. T-Mac is still young and is currently dealing with a foot injury. Brazel's a rookie. Xavier Legette has proven to be unreliable. A lot of people talk about the Kansas City game a few years ago as like Bryce's somewhat coming out party after the benching. Guess who was his main target during that game?
David
Moore. And I think if you watch that game, if you go back and watch the game in totality, he makes some incredible big plays in that game. And to me, that's what you need. He does not need to start. He does not need to take reps over Chris Brazel or Xavier Legette or Jalen Coker or T-Mac. But when one of those guys goes down, he is an easy plug-and-play player that you can rely on. You don't have to worry about a lack of experience or a lack of knowledge of the system. He's got it. He's your cheat code. He's your get out of depth problems free player. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way we should look at it. And if that means that a David Moore season during the offseason is going to be written about pretty consistently, then that's what it is.
Then that is what it is. You brought up a good point. We should probably mention that Tetero McMillan, while he did have a helmet and he did have a uniform on today and did work through individual drills, did not participate in team reps. Dave Canales cited the fact that they're still trying to build his workload and, get him ready and not rush him back because, this is still June and he wants T-Mac to be completely healthy come training camp and so on. Okay, before we move on with the rest of our show, I just have one more wide receiver question for you, Mike. What did you make of the effusive comments that Bryce Young and Dave Canales made about Xavier Legette? Because we spent a lot of time asking those two about David Moore specifically, but particularly Bryce Young. He was like really happy with the progression, particularly of Xavier's comfortability in the offense, his familiarity with the system, and how he's kind of grown into this veteran leader among the younger guys, telling them where to line up, explaining to them certain concepts, and having high level discussions with Bryce about, okay, when the defense is showing quarters, what do you want me to do? Oh, when they're in this exact zone coverage, I can find some space here and I can just sit down here. Like, it was kind of cool to hear Bryce say such positive things about Xavier. I'm curious to hear kind of what you drew from that, and also just kind of what you've seen from his spring as a whole today.
I think it's positive reinforcement. I think it's, if you see something good, say something good.
Mm-hmm.
He is a guy that I think they've challenged him this offseason. He knows what he needs to do. It's an important offseason for him. And I think Bryce, as a leader, is taking a step forward. He invited him to Mullen, South Carolina. He went. There are quarterbacks who kind of just disappear during the offseason. And Bryce has kind of put himself out there in this way, which is not something that we've seen him do like explicitly over the past 2 years. As Bryce is growing into a leader and as a guy who is a voice in the locker room, I think being able to have off the field relationships out in public, out in different areas is really important. I also think for everything that's said about Xavier Legette's game, he seems like his heart is in the right place. He seems like a guy who does really care a lot and works really hard and wants to be very good. All that aside, it's got to add up to something. I think you can show grace to a person who means well, but if they're not productive, you also are fair to give them constructive criticism. And I think with Legette, he's faced that constructive criticism. He looks noticeably spelter. He looks like he's in good shape. He looks pretty quick in and out of breaks. He's caught the ball pretty cleanly so far that we've seen. And I've written this before. I've said this before on the program. They still believe in him. Do they believe in him to be the number one wide receiver? No. That is abundantly clear. That's why they drafted T-Mac. And frankly, he is not a number one wide receiver. He's got to figure out now if he's a number 2 or a number 3 guy, or if he's going to be upstaged by a rookie. And that's going to be big for him. But I think Canales and Bryce, all their messaging and their actions, frankly, are showing that they have the belief and trust in Legette. And I think that that's the most important thing. When you have belief from other people, your confidence can grow. And I think Legette has handled himself the right way this offseason. We're not seeing music videos. We're not seeing, him try to obtain attention in a,
in like a superstar way.
Yeah, he's not. He doesn't come off as superficial in any sort of fashion. I think he's genuinely trying to be part of the team and be a proper example for even the younger guys who he's competing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Good stopping point to now kick it to our interview with Dominique Dafney. Again,
Tom Daff.
Again, a former Panthers tight end who knows a lot about a Panthers offseason.
And we are joined by former Packers, Panthers, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end Dominique Dafney, who is currently hosting a podcast on Believe in Iowa and is also doing a pretty awesome tight end series. And we wanted to have him on to kind of get some perspective on the Panthers tight end room, as well as Dave Canales. Dom, Daff, how you doing?
Doing good. Trying to survive Nashville, like I'm sure many other people are. But I'm doing good. Appreciate you guys for having me on.
Well, they call Charlotte the Nashville of, well, I guess it's the Southeast. Wait,
Yeah.
but then it also Nashville's in the Southeast. I don't know. My producer's shaking his head. But anyway, you know a bit about Charlotte. And we wanted to kind of ask you, what's it like working with Dave Canales during an NFL offseason, from the offseason program to OTAs to minicamp to training camp? What is the energy like? How forthcoming is he with the plans? What is the entire detail of that offseason program?
No, he's very detail oriented, and it's a lot about getting back to the basics as you enter into phase 1, 2, and 3, into OTAs, into mini camp. It's learning the playbook, learning, I mean, not only just the plays, but the details of the routes and the details of your responsibilities. And then you build from there. So then we can, kind of get fancy with motions and shifts, but it's essentially about learning your details, learning the basics, and then being able to go from there. He kind of did the same thing at Tampa, where we're just getting back to the X's and O's, and we're trying to figure out football and teach people football, because obviously you have so many new guys coming in, whether it's new players, whether it's new NFL players, as in rookies coming in. So we're all learning. We're all trying to, you know, rewire our brains to get ready for a long haul of NFL season. So a lot of it is about getting back in that football mentality, as well as getting back in that football shape.
What is something that sticks out? I mean, you've been on a couple of different NFL teams. What sticks out to you in particular about Dave, the offensive coordinator, but then also Dave, the head coach?
I think he's extremely hands on, excuse me. Obviously, being there with him in Tampa Bay, like, he was the OC, so he was doing a lot of the meetings. But I mean, even in Carolina, like, he's still there for all the meetings. He's still pitching in his 2 cents in all the meetings, whether it was special teams, whether it was offense. He's there. He shows a presence. He's going to be there for you. He's going to ask questions, as well as, you know, kind of ask you questions of if things make sense. He wants to be there for you as an athlete and as a person, of, making sure you're good, making sure your body's right. As far as, like, they took very good care of us in Carolina and Tampa Bay, because it was 100 degrees every day. But in Carolina, it gets swampy. It rains some days, but they did a good job of taking care of us, making sure, we're taking care of, whether it was our hydration, the recovery aspect. He's very hands on with the whole process. And I think that's really what makes him a good coach, and is what's going to make him a really good head coach.
Dom, anyone who goes through your Instagram knows that life after football for you, at least for right now, is looking like uh, analyzing tight ends and looking at who the next tight ends in the league are going to be, what's special about them, and all these sorts of things. Can you kind of tell us what inspired you to kind of go down this route as, someone who's specializing in and getting involved in the media in this way?
I think just the fact that I enjoyed it so much. I didn't know, I started calling games this fall, and I called 4 of them. And to be honest, I didn't know if I would like it. Like, I kind of was just taking a swing and wanted to try it out and kind of see if I would enjoy it, because I know I like talking football, obviously. I mean, who doesn't like it? Who doesn't like talking sports? Who doesn't like analyzing the game if you've been in it? But being in that hot seat in the box was something completely different. And I just wanted to try it. And if I liked it, cool. If I didn't, cool. But I actually fell in love with it, and kind of found, I guess, that similar attitude of wanting to be better and wanting to be really good, and that drive to keep getting those reps in and keep getting better, that you do with sports. It would kind of equate into the same thing. So when I had that feeling of, oh, I want to keep doing this, that's what really got me excited, and to keep, like, working, keep getting those reps, keeps asking questions, keep firing up LinkedIn, asking people for, hey, can you check out my reel? Tell me, what I'm doing right. Give me anything, any advice would be helpful. So I think that hunger that I felt when I started getting into the media space, and, getting into the booth, that's what really, like, kind of put a light on the fact that I think this is really something that not only am I interested in, but I have gifts at doing. Obviously, I've always been good talking. I've always been good at, like, storytelling, having that conversation. So I was just like, let me combine the two strengths of my life, of football and storytelling, into one. And the fact that I've actually enjoyed it, it's just made it even easier to just keep honing in on the craft and to continue to get better at it.
Absolutely. And I wonder if your ability to analyze a game and to, you know, put enrich conversations in this way kind of benefited you as a player in tight end rooms, like while you were playing in the NFL. Do you see some transferable skills between that? Because I imagine that being in a tight end room and enriching a conversation inside the room isn't all that different than being just outside the room and explaining, okay, here's what went down on this play.
Oh, 100%. And I think a lot of that came from the Green Bay days where I had to get out of my comfort zone and ask about playing tight end because I played receiver my entire life, college, high school, little league. I was a receiver or a running back. So I really didn't understand what a six tech was, what a over front, under front. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I really had to be vulnerable in that moment and just be like, I always think it's funny. My coach, it was Justin Outen at Green Bay. He brought up, we were at Thanksgiving and we had a couple drinks, so guys are a little bit more emotional than we should have been. But he was like, one of the best questions I've ever been asked by one of my players was, how do you watch film? And he was like, Mercedes Lewis was like, who asked you that? And he pointed right at me. And I was like, oh yeah, I did ask him that because from a receiver standpoint, I mean, you're watching the receiver, you're watching the DBs, you're watching the corners, you're watching the roof, seeing how they change from 1 to 2 to 2 to 1. From tight end perspective, it was completely different. Like watching how the linebackers are shifted and where the D line is at, and you have to know. I mean, almost everything that the quarterback knows in order to really know your job. To the details that I was talking about earlier that we like to harp on, you really have to know all of those. So I think the conversation started there of how do I watch film? How do I be the best tight end I could be? Into the weird question that Jo would always ask: do you guys wipe from the front or from the back? And you just vulnerability. You just keep going. You keep going, and we're talking about what we're doing on the weekend, and it just grows because tight ends are goofy. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Kittle. Gronkowski is one of the goofiest dudes. So I mean, in the room, it usually starts very analytical or X's and O's, and it ends God knows where. So I think a lot of that comes from those early tight end rooms.
You were in the Panthers tight end room all last summer, so you got to know Tommy and Mitch and the governor James Mitchell and JT Sanders. A lot. You're on social media. You kind of see what the narrative is about that tight end room. Can you tell us why that narrative is either wrong or different or on point?
I think a lot of it comes from, I guess, the way that the game is shifting. I think, if a receiver room doesn't have all pro, guy, and then they're saying, our receiver room isn't that good. For tight ends, if it's not Kelsey or George Kittle, our receiver or tight end room could use some work. So a lot of it has to come from, just the idea that you need that one person who's supposed to be that. But I think the fact that their greatest weapon is that all of them can play at a high level is what makes them so dangerous. If we could easily just guard Kittle and say, hey, everybody else beat us, that's easy. That's easy to do. But if we have Tommy and JT and Mitch and James and they're like, ooh, shoot, all of them can run routes. All of them can block. I feel like that's what makes them dangerous. And, Mitch he's a big boy. Like he's a big guy. He runs good routes. He's got soft hands. So he's going to turn into a really good tight end. JT, he slimmed down a lot. And after his first year, really was running routes at his peak, in my opinion. I thought he came in extremely in shape and just with a different mindset. And Tommy's kind of like I guess he's not old, but he's like the older one in the room because he's got the most experience. So he's kind of like the perfectionist where every first, second step is really perfected. The hand placement, his hat placement, everything with him is doing it at the small details, doing it perfected. So I think the fact that you have this gumbo of players who not only play well, but, get along very well, that's what tight end rooms are. That's when they're the most dangerous. I mean, you look at the Seattle Seahawks, they didn't have any, the greatest tight end room, the top tier tight end, but they all did their roles. They all had their roles, and they did them at the best of their peak. And I think that's exactly what the Carolina Panthers could have next year.
So, Dom, a couple of other guys that you've worked with, you were there for Rasheed Walker's rookie offseason in Green Bay, and you also worked with A.J. Dillon during his first couple of years. What are some takeaways from those guys in your brief time with them?
I would say for Rasheed, he was quiet, but like a workhorse. And obviously, he's an athletic guy, smart guy, came from Penn State. Even though I hate to say it, that Penn State players are good. Well, I don't know now because they're all Iowa State players now, so I don't know what I could say about him. But no, he was just a quiet workhorse, and he was extremely athletic, would always be the top 5 as far as like offensive guys in our competitions we would do in the weight room. So he was obviously an athlete. And the fact that it's a West Coast style offense, he's going to be able to come in and be pretty comfortable. Obviously, some of the terminology is a bit different, but the ideology is the same. Run the ball and open up the rest of the offense through the run game. As far as AJ, I mean, that's my boy. I love AJ Dillon. Went to his wedding. That's one of the guys that I came in with my rookie year. I wish we had got a chance to play in that backfield more because we would joke like that's the heaviest backfield ever. Like I weighed 250, he weighed 250. Some of the biggest quads you've ever seen in the backfield from the two guys before, Picard and King Henry came around. But he's another guy who's extremely you call James Mitchell the governor. We called him the mayor of Door County. So that's one of the guys I got love for AJ, and he's going to come in and work for you. And one of those guys who's going to really bruise your defense. Obviously, he's 250 pounds and can really run. So just being able to work with him and his knowledge of the game, the fact that he just loves to play football, and he just loves this game. He loves to be around the guys. He loves to have that camaraderie and hang out and just play ball. So like he's a guy that you guys are I feel like the city of Charlotte is going to love just because he has that side where he's very, a fan favorite, but he's also going to work his butt off for you on the football field.
It's not a Processing Blue podcast if we don't ask you about Bryce Young. Knowing just knowing him last offseason, playing with him last offseason, and watching him ascend, particularly at the end of last year, what impressed you the most? What do you think gets overlooked about Bryce Young's game? Just what insights about Bryce Young do you think people aren't talking about enough?
I think he has a lot more composure than he's given like credit for. And obviously you could look at it from a football perspective, but I'm thinking even from outside of football, like it's not easy to come into the NFL and immediately have 3-4 coaching changes when you're used to that Alabama way of football. Like that's pretty hard in itself. And then you get benched and you come back, and then there's a lot of mental hurdles that he had to go through, and yet he's still smiling, the same old Bryce Young that we all know. So there's a lot of composure with him on and off the field that I don't think gets highlighted enough because, I mean, it's hard. Playing at the NFL level at any position, at any time, at any era, it's hard. That's why not everybody gets to do it. So it's like the fact that he's been able to be a pro's pro and come in every day and still work his butt off, no matter where he is on the depth chart, no matter who's his head coach or his OC. I think a lot of that really needs to be harped on of, this kid really comes in and really works his butt off and is giving everything he has. He has the Alabama mentality. I mean, it's not going anywhere. So he's going to come in and work extremely hard for you. I think the fact that he has Dave Canales, who they called him the quarterback guru with Geno Smith and then Baker Mayfield and now here, I think the fact that they have more time together, that's only going to make them better. That's only going to get him more comfortable in that playbook and on the field. And he's only going to grow. He's only going to get better. He's only going to become a better NFL quarterback. And I mean, the sky's the limit when you have an arm like that, when you have a talent like Bryce Young.
Dom, you're a guy who has been on practice squads and who has had to fight for jobs during training camp. If you had to give advice, and you made it onto the field for 15 games in your career, that's more than billions of people can say who are living on this planet. You've played in the NFL. You scored a touchdown. That's something that everybody dreams of doing. what advice would you give to somebody who's coming into maybe their first or second training camp and is trying to make the roster and is trying to at least hang on with the practice squad heading into this summer?
Learn that playbook. I mean, like the back of your hand, learn it. And whether it's the signals, the code words, the snap counts, I mean, know more than you should even know, to a point where sometimes the receivers will look at you and be like, what's my route? And you could tell them. So I was like, that's when I got to Green Bay, like my schedule was I would get back to the room around 8 o'clock, would study my playbook until 10, take a break, get some lunch or get some dinner, and then study until 11 and then go to bed. That was what I did for like 2 months straight. And I knew that playbook like I knew everybody's route on every single play. I knew every signal. I knew everything. And the more you know, the better you're going to be. When you could play Y, when you could play Y and I'm speaking from a tight end's perspective, of course. When you play Y, when you play Y and F, when you can play fullback, when you can, when they have a hard time of taking you off the field, I mean, that's going to give you the best chance to actually get on the 53. If you know every single play, if you know every single person's responsibility, if they can really trust in you, and building that trust is going to get you on the field. And then on top of that, showing it in practice. So when you have an opportunity, whether it's on Mondays or Tuesdays, when it's or Mondays or Wednesdays when it's like a little, lower tempo, even into the Thursdays and Fridays when it's fast tempo, if you get an opportunity to get a play, and they usually have like cards that you read from, and there's some that's usually highlighted who's getting the ball. If you ever get that chance where your route is highlighted, make a play. No matter who's guarding you, no matter what. Like take full advantage of the opportunities you're given, because they're not given to many people, like you just said. And sometimes it's that pressure where you're here on Monday, you might not be here on Tuesday or Wednesday. I've seen guys, we had it was either a Thursday night game or something against the 49ers in 2020. I saw a guy, usually on those days you have 2 practices because you need to get everything in because it's a short week. I saw a guy be at that first practice, get cut, and not be at the second practice in the same day. So, I mean, it's really the pressure. It's really that anxiety of I could really not be here tomorrow. So you have to take advantage. You don't have the luxuries of dropping balls or not knowing routes or not knowing the plays. Like, you need to know everything because you have no idea when it's going to be your time to make a play, and you have no idea, when they're going to need you to come in and possibly play, possibly be on scout team, possibly be on special teams. So there should be no excuses. You have to know everything, all the details, all the routes, all the schemes. You have to know everything.
Well, and I guess my last question is, where can everybody find you on YouTube and your tight end series?
I got YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, the whole nine. Everything's Dominique Dafney. If there's not any, I've tried to find it. There's not anybody else with the same name as me.
I'm going to try to convince you to change it all to Dom Daff, but that's it for another podcast. That's going to happen. Well, Dom, thanks for joining us on the Processing Blue podcast. We really appreciate your insight. And I think anybody who is trying to make that roster watching this program potentially should really heed that advice. Get in that playbook now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's got to be your Bible. You want to make it in the big show. Like, you have to be a little bit psychotic about it and just learn everything. Ask any questions, no questions, a dumb question, and just be vulnerable enough to ask the guys who you look up to for some help, for some advice. And I guarantee you they'll give it to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dom. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we're back. Mike, what'd you think of that interview?
Well, I think it's always good to have perspective from somebody who's in it, instead of 2 chuckleheads who cover the team. Of course, I'm talking about Scott Fowler and somebody else, not us.
Not us. Of course not.
I mean, whatever. I think it's important. We talked about the David Moore stuff where he seems to get like an unnecessary amount of heat for like no reason whatsoever. I think it's important to also acknowledge that with the tight end position. Like, they're doing what the Panthers envisioned them to do. They didn't draft a tight end, which based on a lot of my reporting, they did a ton of research on that group. So for them to pass on a tight end says they have a lot of trust in the group. A lot of people wanted to sign Njoku. They balked at that, probably mostly due to the price tag and the fit in the locker room. To me, the tight end room is kind of evolving every year. And like David Moore, they have three guys who kind of are interchangeable and can be used in different ways. Jatavian Sanders looked pretty good on Tuesday, I thought, streaking across the middle, catching passes. Mitchell Evans had a really nice play where he beat your guy, Damani Richardson, over the middle in a crowd, and Bryce just put it on his hands. And even Felipe Franks, who I wrote about on Tuesday, Kenny Pickett really likes throwing to him for some reason, which is really funny because optically it's weird that Kenny Pickett has gloves on both of his hands and Felipe Franks is catching the ball without gloves. I made Zach chuckle, so I know it's funny.
Wait, was he chuckling because you used the phrase optically weird?
Probably. I mean, he likes laughing at me on a general, basis. But I think that's what I take away from it. I also think from the perspective of a guy who has played 15 games in the league, and you can say whatever you want about that, but that's 15 more games than billions of people on this earth. I think it's a guy who played at Lambeau Field, who has worked with Dave Canales as an offensive coordinator and as a head coach. Like, I just think his perspective was great.
Yeah, completely agree. We talked a lot about offense, naturally. If we can just quickly go over to the defensive side of the ball, because I thought one question that you asked, Dave, was mad illuminating when we're talking about Shaw Smith-Wade. The Shaw Smith-Wade, what you laughing at?
When you said mad illuminating, Zach just lost it. So,
I mean, I guess that is a strange mix of
the Zietlow
and SAT. Yeah, no, that was weird. Okay, but Shaw Smith-Wade, he took some reps at safety on Tuesday. Is that legit, do you think? What do you think about that, Mike?
I've kind of Christian pondered that thought quite a bit, or Sam pondered, whichever your preference. I think he actually makes a lot of sense as a post safety, especially in bigger nickel packages. If you were trying to test Nick Scott or have a backup plan for Nick Scott, to me, he makes a lot more sense than Zakee Wheatley, who is still learning an NFL defense, who I think actually complements Trevon Merrick in that Lathan Ransom role a little bit better. And I think it gives Shaw more value in that we have kind of seen it that it's positioned that Corey Thornton's the favorite to win the nickel job. I mean, at least from our perspective, right? The way they're using him, the way Davis talked about him. So if Shaw's not going to start at nickel, he needs to have some versatility. And I actually think he's an ideal candidate because whenever you talk to anybody about him, they talk about his study habits, about how quick of a thinker he is and how adaptable he is. If you remember, he had never played the nickel position before coming to the NFL. He had 3 practices at the Senior Bowl and everybody is like, yeah, that's where he's going to play. And then he was able to adapt enough that he started down the stretch of his rookie season, had that memorable interception against Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay towards the end of the season. Then you fast forward and he's the starting nickel, had kind of an up and down season, helped seal their win in week 3 against the Falcons with a pick 6, and then loses his job to Corey Thornton, but then regains it and is their starting nickel in the playoffs. So he's a guy that I think adapts pretty well. I don't think he takes adversity poorly, and I think he'll be game for this because when you look at options to potentially push or replace Nick Scott if he deals with injury, you want a guy who's smart, who can see the field really well, and can communicate. Well, Shaw Smith-Wade checks off every single one of those boxes. And so I understand what they're trying to accomplish here by having him mix and match and being able to have different looks, because you could have Merrick at the nickel position, or you could play dime linebacker. You can move Nick Scott to the box or Lathan Ransom. You can do all these different things. And I think it's an opportunity for Avero to actually be pretty creative and forward thinking with how he uses his secondary packages.
Yeah, but I mean, the charitable counter argument to all that, which I think everything you said is correct and legit, but the charitable counter argument is Shaw Smith-Wade isn't the physical profile that this defense normally likes in their defensive backs.
100% correct.
Zakee Wheatley was touted straight up as a ball hawking safety. You'd think that he would also be a good complement to Trey Merrick. So I guess I can buy the argument of, well, if Zakee isn't going to be right behind Nick Scott, or if something happens and Zakee's not quite ready, then Shaw can kind of fit into that role. But I mean, Wheatley's played really well in his opportunities. I know he's running with the twos and he's playing against, Kenny Pickett, who hasn't yet had a really good day, I don't think, at least from what the media has seen. But
I would push back a little bit. I thought he was pretty adequate the second OTA practice. But yeah, no, I agree to what you're saying. I agree. I'm talking about Kenny Pickett.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I just think the Shaw Smith-Wade move is interesting. To your point of, we got to build value for him, and we also got to see what we have in him, because he was a draft pick, and we're going to have to make a decision on his future quite soon. Yeah. Any other lingering thoughts about Shaw Smith-Wade before we move on?
I think you could look at him if you are a baseball fan, and I hate that I always have to reference this, but when you think about like a super utility player, a guy who can play out the corner outfield and a couple of infield positions, that to me is what Shaw Smith-Wade's value would be. Is he a starting caliber player? Maybe. But I think his best value is being a guy like David Moore who can plug holes if you need him. I wouldn't necessarily want him starting at free safety unless there was a major injury, but I think Nick Scott's not really the size, length, speed
That's a good point.
guy either. So that would be my counter argument. Now, could Wheatley be the long-term starting post guy? Absolutely. I just don't see it happening off the bat. And if something happens to Nick Scott in that first month or first half of the season, you need a guy who is, they use the term cerebral with him. You need a guy who can see the field and also communicate the way that Nick Scott can, and Shaw Smith-Wade kind of falls in that line of thinking, in my opinion.
Got you. Yeah. Speaking of Nick Scott and his intangibles as a leader and all these things, to close the show, I wanted to get your opinion on what I thought was an eye-popping quote from high-profile free agent pass rusher Jalen Phillips. In his press conference on Tuesday, someone asked him who the emerging leaders were. Oh, was it you? Oh, heck yeah.
You know what? I think what was most impressive about that is I actually asked him, hey, is there a young guy or somebody on the opposite side of the ball who's really stood out to you? And that's why so like this quote to me, just for context, is more impressive than him just being like, hey, who was the leader on the team? So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is great context, because you were saying, is there a young guy who has stood out to you from a leadership perspective, whatever, even on the offensive side of the ball? And he just said what was authentic as opposed to trying to manufacture something for your question. And he said, quote, Chuba is positioning himself as the foremost leader of the team. I think this is interesting because I went on the radio last week and I tried to say, hey, Chuba Hubbard is the emotional leader of this team. He is the leading voice in this locker room. And I got a tiny bit of pushback saying, no, this is Bryce Young's team, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand why that is the sentiment. But to discard Chuba Hubbard, to discard Chuba Hubbard is not fair. It's not the right thing to do. That you don't know this team if you don't think that Chuba Hubbard is an invaluable part of it. And I just thought that was mad cool from Jalen Phillips to kind of say that outright. Did you have? I guess I don't have any other takeaways besides the fact that it was high praise. But Mike, what was it surprising to you at all? Where are you at with this?
as a beat writer, I was impressed by it. I wasn't surprised by it even in the slightest. I think I've told you privately that Chuba Hubbard might be the most impressive player that I've covered here. Just from a leadership standpoint, from a mindset standpoint. He, like, if you forget like what he went through during his college career or his first 2 seasons here, people saying he couldn't catch the ball, people just saying he was probably a kick returner. There was a lot of narratives. And I think what's impressive about him and Tommy Tremble is how they flip those narratives like to the umpth degree in a lot of ways. Tommy's still kind of battling his own kind of like underrated kind of aspect because people don't value blocking the way they probably should in theory. But I think Chuba Hubbard's handling of everything, the way I've seen him handle the CMC trade, the way he handled taking a backseat to Deontay Foreman, to taking a backseat to Miles Sanders and then upstaging him, to being benched for Rico Dowdle. I don't know that I've ever covered a player who's as consistent in their mindset and their self-belief through situations like this as Chuba Hubbard. And if there was a guy I was going to bet on, Dan Morgan said this during a spot in their blueprint thing, and he has said this to us before, where he's like, if you're going to miss on a player, you're typically going to miss on the person, not the talent. And if I were to bet on a person coming back from adversity the way that they have, the way you see him dealing with Jonathan Brooks, the relationship that they have, the mentoring that he has done, the way he has handled the Rico stuff and the Miles stuff and all that stuff, Chuba Hubbard would be a guy I would bet on because he has such a high floor, but his ability to overcome stuff has such a high ceiling that I think all of that fits. And I think he's unquestionably the leader in the locker room. Dave Canales' first year I don't know if Dave Canales makes it through into year 2, if Chuba Hubbard is not kind of guiding that locker room through the ups and downs of everything, especially with Bryce Young being benched and all this other stuff. I know sometimes we kind of hone in on stuff that other people don't get to see, the David Moores of it all. Chuba Hubbard kept that team afloat in a lot of ways that first year under Canales. And frankly, during the Reich year when a lot of stuff was going wrong, Chuba's extremely accountable. He's extremely self-confident. And I think he's a guy that you can build a locker room around. And I think Dave Canales believes that. I think Dan Morgan definitely believes that. And that's why he got paid. And that's why he's back here. And while everybody wanted him traded last year or cut, he is still standing. He's still a guy in process blue. And we get to process some blue for you. So with that, I will segue to one of my favorite parts of the
show. Mike, that was perfectly said. Anything else that you want to remind our listeners, our viewers, before we head on out of here?
Access Panthers. Whoa. Who'd have thunk it? You can subscribe by checking out this QR code in the left corner. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can also check it out in all of our articles. There's a link to just sign up, just your email. It's free. It comes to your inbox every Monday morning, and during the season it comes every Saturday morning and Monday morning, and you get a little bit of Alex, you get a little bit of me, you get different styles, you'll get exclusive reporting, exclusive commentary, and all that stuff, and you'll get to catch up on what you maybe missed during the week. It's something we take a lot of pride in, similar to the Processing Blue podcast. You might have heard of it, or you're hearing it right now. And also, stay tuned. We're going to do some positional series on charlotteobserver.com. We've got some bigger stories coming up. We'll be back next week with Scott Fowler, the columnist, and we'll kind of recap everything we saw from mandatory minicamp. But that's what I got for you. I hope you guys are having a wonderful start to your summer. And Alex, take it away.
And here we go. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Xavier Legette. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
I'll definitely try. Zach, that's a wrap.